thank you, Michael Lavelle, for doing this.
Welcome.
First of all, cinematographer, writer, director, which one do you prefer to go by?
Depends on which side of the bed I get out of. I think it's in Ireland, filmmaking is a small industry, and it's probably quite hard to get away with doing a couple of roles because people like to think of you as one thing. It's easier for you to get work, and it's easier for them to think, oh, that's what you do, okay, fine. So originally when I started out in film, I mean, I just wanted to make films and I didn't really think about it. Then I went to film school, and when I went to film school, I was already had been writing for years, just small things myself. I didn't even dream of becoming a filmmaker, but I was writing, and even probably writing film. I was writing films, but I didn't think I could be a filmmaker because, well, I'm from Navan and it's a small town, and filmmakers come from Hollywood, so I couldn't make that leap.
I know, yeah.
So when I did eventually go and try and say, right, I'm going to be a filmmaker, I didn't really know what the roles were. I had been making little short films myself since I was about 6 years old, on my dad's Super 8 camera. So I was just making films, and I just do whatever it did, whatever it took. But so in answer to your question, yeah, I'm kind of all three, and as long as I can get away with it, I'll keep doing that.
Okay. So you went to film school. Was that your entry into this, if you like?
Well, like I say, when I was about 6 or 7 years old, I had a really funny experience with film because I mean, it's funny, the new Star Wars films are about to come out, and my original love of film was I was brought to Superman and Bedknobs and Broomsticks when I was about 5, and I was 5.5, and I just was mesmerised. I bought a red coat and bought a red bicycle and used to ride up and down the road with just the hood on my head and the coat streaming out behind me, thinking, okay, I am Superman, and jumping off the back wall and all that kind of stuff. But this feels like a very tangential way to answer.
No,
it's okay. Tangential is good. Okay, that's the kind of way we are. Okay, then I'm fine. Okay, yeah. So I just absolutely love those films, and they just kind of opened up a world of wonder to me. And so the first time I ever went, those 2 times I went to the cinema and brought by my aunt, and it just blew my mind. And then I had a friend in primary school who was from the United States, and he arrived. He sat beside me on the first day of primary school, and he had these incredible toys, and they were little Star Wars figurines, and I'd never seen Star Wars, never heard of Star Wars. But he started telling me the story of Star Wars, and he had obviously seen the film. But I became completely obsessed with it, even though I'd never seen the film, and I used to play Star Wars with him at lunchtime and get him to tell me the story again. So even though I'd never seen the film, I'd imagined it a million billion times in a child's eyes with the figurines, and that's how I had seen Star Wars before I ever saw it. And then I actually didn't get to see it until my parents brought me to see Jaws when I was about 7, and it totally terrified me. It was fantastic. Absolutely loved it. And then they somehow managed to bring me up to Dublin, which was to go to Big Schmuck when you were a kid, to see the opening night of Empire Strikes Back when that came out, and that was big for me. And then eventually I got to see Star Wars, but so that I was kind of obsessed with movies from that age. And my dad then got a Super 8 camera from my mum, and one day he put it down and I picked it up, and I never put it down after that. It was kind of my camera. And I just started making stop motion animation films with little Star Wars figurines, and I would cut in camera and I would interact live action with that. So I made I cut out sounds so cheesy. I put out black plastic bags all around the wall of the living room, and then got the Christmas lights and poked them through the back of it so it would be like stars against the black sky. And then got my dad to screw about 10 light bulbs on a stick. So I had a light source. So I had kind of one big stick with about 10 60-watt light bulbs strapped to it, and you could plug it in and plug it out. That was it. And then and I had this Super 8 camera, and then I built out of cardboard, like say the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon, and I would sit in it and then film myself pretending to fly the Millennium Falcon, and then cut in stop motion action of the Millennium. I had a toy Millennium Falcon, so I would stop motion action that, like attacking a rebel base or something, and then I would pause it in midair and cut out a piece of orange fluorescent cardboard and put it in for 2 frames from the guns down to the ground, and then take it away, and then put in a cutout explosion on the ground for 2 frames, and then put in a larger explosion on the ground for 2 frames, and then a larger explosion on the ground for 2 frames, just out of cutout paper, so it looks like the explosion gets bigger.
Yeah.
And I just edited in camera and made those little films.
And where did you learn to do, like what age were you at this?
I started at 6, and I did it from about the age of about 6 till 8 or 9.
And where did you learn to like edit and do this sort of thing at 6?
I didn't. I mean, it was just like, well, I need to see that, and then when the spaceship's flying up, I want to see who's in it. Well, I'm going to be in it, so I would just sit I would just do it.
It was just that childlike kind of.
Yeah, just play. It's like kind of it's like those Michel Gondry films. I'm going, oh my god, that's my guy. It's like just cut the stuff up, stick it up. It doesn't matter if it's crappy. It's the idea, and once you get into it, then it's fine. And obviously, you get it as close as you can, but it's the spirit of it that was the most important thing, and the kind of heart of it.
And when you eventually saw Star Wars, how different was it from filming?
I mean, it was so bad. I was like, I remember the day it was coming on that evening on I still have because I videotaped it off the television, so I still have it with those really bad ITV ads. With like, I remember there was a guy from a comedy show, and he was bringing his daughters on a camping trip, and they were trying to market the new Toyota or something. I don't even know if it was a Toyota. It was a new car anyway. And he goes, and she goes, Daddy, does your car stereo? Is there a stereo in our car? And the dad goes, yes, but it doesn't play Duran Duran. And like all those really terrible ads are in the middle of this version of Star Wars that I recorded. But when I recorded it, I remember it starts somehow. The beginning of the recording didn't work, and the film only started from the oil bath of C-3PO. So it was like a load of fuzzy stuff because it was all those bad VHS tapes back in the 80s, and then it's all this fuzzy stuff of at the beginning you can't see anything, and then it's like C-3PO taking an oil bath. So I watched the movie, I don't know, a couple of 100 times, but always from that point. Somehow I didn't tape the beginning, I don't know. But yeah, so did it live up to my expectations? Yeah, I mean, totally blew my mind. Yeah. Completely blew my mind. Completely blew my mind.
So within that, were you always going to go to film school? Was that kind of a...
Absolutely not.
No.
Never even thought I could be a filmmaker. Never crossed my mind that I could be a filmmaker.
So
I always did plays in school, and I acted in plays and wrote stuff and all that kind of stuff, and it was just the thing I loved doing.
Yeah.
That was kind of like, that's what I loved doing. And then I was like, and then there's real life,
Yeah.
And in real life, I liked sports, and I was going to say I was really good academically. That's not true. My sister was really good academically, and I was jealous. And she'd come back, and I'd get like B's and C's, which were all fine. But my sister was like all straight A's, always. And like she'd get an A- or something, and she'd be like, yeah, didn't really study for that one, or now she was really hardworking and very, very intelligent, so killer combination. But I kind of just felt bad when I'd come in with these kind of B's and C's all the time. So I remember in second year of secondary school, I said, F this, I'm going to work hard, and I can get A's. And I think that year I worked like the hardest I've ever worked for some reason, and I started getting like really good A grades and stuff. And from that point on, I kind of thought of myself as being really academic.
Okay.
And then I fell in love with books at about the age of 16, and I read loads and loads and loads, but still never thought that I could be a filmmaker. And then I got a scholarship to Canada for 2 years to what's called a United World College, which is it was an academic scholarship, and the college was set up to to promote peace and international understanding between nations.
Okay.
So it's an incredibly unique place. I was saying it's unique, but there are about 8 of them around the world, but they're all different.
Mm-hmm.
But these United World Colleges, and I went to this one. It was named after Lester Pearson, who was the Prime Minister of Canada back in the 70s, and he won the Nobel Prize for Peace. And they set it up after him, and basically there were 100 students in my year. We were selected from 80 countries around the world, and we spent 2 years studying together. I mean, there were like people from, abject poverty and people from incredible wealth, because everybody was there on an academic scholarship. So there was all sorts, but yeah, we studied together for these 2 years.
And what were you studying?
Well, I finished my Leaving Cert here, and then I went and I studied what was the International Baccalaureate, the IB.
Okay.
So it's like the French bac, but with an international angle, and you've got a massive variety of subjects you can do. And also, so I did 6 subjects there. It's a little bit like doing the Leaving Cert again, but also like maybe a bit more advanced, because you have to take 3. It's a bit more like A-levels, because you have to take 3 higher level subjects.
Okay.
So and there's a big emphasis on them. So I did that even though I had my Leaving Cert, just because it was such an incredible opportunity to study with these people from all around the world and experience their culture. And I did philosophy there, and my mind was open to philosophy there, because I went there and I ended up in a conversation with them. On the first evening I went for dinner, and I ended up in a random conversation with this old dude with a beard. And we were chatting away, blah 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 blah, and then the next day I went in to the head of academics, and it turned out that he was the head of academics, and he kind of politely insisted that I did philosophy. And I was like, look, I have no interest in philosophy. And he says, okay, well look, do any, just do it for a week, and if you don't like it, come back to me and I'll give you whatever course you want. And I was like, okay, now I got you, perfect. So I thought I'd win for the week and I'll go back and I'll ask him exactly what I want. I went in for the first class and I couldn't walk out the door. It was amazing. Really, I was like, oh my God, we're allowed to get grades for talking and thinking about this stuff. This is the stuff that's on in my mind, but I didn't know people talked about this stuff. It's so mind-bending when you're that age. Yeah. So then I left there, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do, because probably what I wanted to do was make films, but that still didn't seem like a real thing. And when I was there, I wrote plays and acted in plays and stuff, and still never thought I could do it. Like, I didn't think it was a job. So I left there and I applied for politics, philosophy and economics in Brasenose College in Oxford, and I applied for medicine in Edinburgh University, and I applied for law in UCC. And so I took like complete scatterbrain. Like I just didn't know what I wanted to do, and I opted for. I didn't get the Oxford, and I got an interview, but I didn't get the place. And it was one of those things. It was probably the thing that it broke my heart at the time, because I was like, ooh, Oxford, wow, it's going to be so amazing. And I totally fluffed the interview. I mean, I completely fluffed it. I was terrible. And I came out going, oh my God, what did I say in there? But anyway.
And was it just nerves?
Yeah, it was total. I mean, I didn't sleep the night before, and I'd just flown in from Canada to do the interview, and it was like, it was Oxford, and I was like, oh my God, and I was a bit overwhelmed. But it was actually the luckiest thing that never happened to me.
But it's so funny, like those times when, yeah.
I'd be kind of grey and bookish now if I did that. I don't know if I would be, but I would be more certainly.
But you look back on something that you really wanted a couple of months later, and something else has happened, and wouldn't have happened if, Totally, yeah. So I mean, I did law. I did law in UCC, and loved it. Really enjoyed it. I had fantastic professors there, great friends. And it was so interesting, and there was a certain aspect of law that really excited me. I mean, I really loved jurisprudence, I really liked criminal law, and actually company law I really liked. I liked the idea of being utterly ruthless in a company law firm, and then I also kind of was interested in becoming a barrister. Now, whether I would have been any good at any of those things, I'm not sure, but that's kind of what I thought of. And then I was lining myself up to do that, and I finished law school, and a girl I was going out with at the time wanted to go to London for the summer. So I was like, okay, well, the summer, that's just the summer, and then I can come back and be a lawyer or be a barrister or whatever. And I went to London with her, and I worked in terrible jobs. I worked
in lots of bars and with alcoholic Irish owners. Where I'd have to pick them up off the floor at about 11:30 in the morning, and try and run the bar myself. And then I worked in an Italian restaurant, and I worked in a really big mega Irish bar in London.
And where were you living in London?
I lived just off Brick Lane before it was cool. It was when it was bombed, actually. It was just off Brick Lane, and I was the only white person in the building. Everybody else was Bangladeshi, and but it was a really wonderful community. They were really, really. I mean, I kind of just. They couldn't speak really much English, the people I was surrounded by, and I couldn't speak any of it because it was their language, Bangladeshi. But the kids were really friendly, and you kind of just have laughs at them and throw stuff and all that. But they were very nice community. So I lived there, and I lived in Bethnal Green, and I lived in Hackney. So I kind of bounced around a little bit. And actually,
this was just over summer.
That was just over summer. Well, no, sorry. Actually, what happened was I was just supposed to be there for summer. Then the girl I was dating, suddenly wasn't dating anymore. She went back to Ireland, and I actually just said, "This is great. I love it here. I'm going to stay." So I kind of stayed on for a year, kind of going, what am I doing here? Well, actually, what happened was a friend of mine who I had been to college in Canada with, who was the year ahead of me in Canada, David Dwan. He's now a professor in Belfast University, and he asked me to get him a book. It was The Poetics of Space by Gaston Bachelard, and he couldn't get it in Ireland, and he said, "There's this bookstore in London, and it's like really amazing, so can you check it there, and maybe it's there." So it turned out to be Foyle's bookstore on Charing Cross Road. So I wandered in off the street on my lunch break from this terrible Italian restaurant where I was working, and I wandered in, and the ground floor was like just a regular ground floor, it had kind of novels and all that kind of stuff. And then the second floor was a little bit messy. It was kind of history and French and stuff like that on the second floor. And then the third floor was kind of what you kind of call a bohemian bookstore. It's a little bit hippie-ish. The books were a little bit scattered, and people were quite chatty and friendly, the staff there and stuff. And then by the time you got to the fourth floor, it was chaos. It was utter chaos. Yeah. And I went in there, and there was a group of people standing around a table, I remember, and they're having a discussion. And they're having this discussion in a way that nobody was dominating the conversation. They were all massively engaged and invested in it, but everybody was listening to what everybody else was saying. So they were kind of all really interesting, had interesting perspectives, but nobody was trying to dominate the conversation. We were just trying to learn from each other and figure something out. And actually, to this day, I can't remember what the conversation was about. I just remember going, "Oh my God, what an incredible conversation." And I was like, "This is a conversation group. I need to kind of hang out with these guys," or whatever. And one by one, they all broke away from it and went back to buying books on the shelves. And I realised this is not a conversation group. This is just a random group of people who should buy books here. And this is a conversation that's just broken out spontaneously. And there were two guys sitting behind the desk there. One of them had his feet on the table. And I was going, "Oh my God, they work here." And they were part of that conversation. I want that job. So I just said to them, "You guys work here?" And they were like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh my God, I need to work here. This is amazing." And one of the guys said to me, "Oh, that guy's leaving in 2 weeks. Why don't you hand in your CV?" So I handed in my CV, and Mrs. Foyle was, I think, 93 at the time. And so I must have been one of the last people interviewed by her. But I went in about 4 or 5 days later and did an interview with her. It didn't last terribly long. I think it was like 15 minutes. Really interesting woman. She was, at the time, I think she was the second richest woman in England after the Queen. She had a letter from Hitler in her that was asking him not to burn the books, to send them over to her, that she'd sell them. And she had an original painting by Miro, I remember, in the hallway. And I was just like, "Oh my God." It was like, yeah. But anyway, went in with her and just had a chat with her, and she was just really nice. Just had a kind of a random, wandery conversation with her. And then at the end of it, she just said, what department do you want to run? And I went philosophy, psychology, Eastern religion. And she goes, okay, it's yours. I was like, brilliant. So I stayed for a year. Yeah. So I stayed for a year and I read all the, and I had really enjoyed law, but I had studied really hard at the end and kind of messed my brain up a little bit in the way I think Irish people do when we're studying for exams. Maybe that's universal. But I felt I had abused my...
Kind of... Yeah, it's like an academic kind of intellectualizing or something.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was a funny kind of thing. It's like I went... through the Leaving Cert, and for the Leaving Cert, you're told this is kind of very much kind of regurgitate, and if you regurgitate very well, you can do very well. Now, I know there are questions that hopefully separate the sheep from the lambs in those kind of exams, but much of the stuff it feels like regurgitation or process. And I mean, I think it's really, really important that you're very good at that. I think it's given me invaluable tools that I brought forward. But in terms of creativity and in terms of appreciating those kind of things, we just don't do it terribly well. And I think there's a nice dance to be had between creativity and hard work, and I don't know if we quite have the balance. So I came, and I certainly, I mean, it's not the system so much as well as the person who's involved in the system. So I know that my approach to studying was quite poor in that I worked way too hard and disappeared into a rabbit hole. But I tend to be quite obsessive when I do something, so I almost kind of lost my mind a little bit, in a way, like, because I mean, I remember being so rigid about my timings of how long I was going to study for and how long I would walk away from the room for to make sure I was getting fresh air, and it's like a little bit, you know, OCD, and I don't even know if OCD is the word. Like, it's just I got into this routine, and I felt like, okay, I'm really getting on top of it, but I memorized so much stuff and drilled it into my brain. I don't think I have that kind of brain. Like, it's just being really honest. Like, it took so much work for me to memorize all that kind of stuff. You know, I can do it, but I memorized loads of law cases by drawing pictures, and I'd have to draw all these pictures, and these became really abstract drawings. So I had these really crazy drawings. And it was like, and then when I would try and think about the legal cases involved, I would picture these drawings that I had done, and I would know, oh, the bird on the tree, that's bird versus whatever, or, you know, it was like, so it was this like, well, so it was just trying to put my brain into this kind of thing, and I'd done it for 4 years, and even done it for the Leaving Cert, and done it again in Pearson College, where you're trying to memorize things. But even, I guess, in Pearson, one of the things was, I mean, we'd go into class, and beforehand, classes were quite small. But for philosophy, for example, our lecturer she was a teacher, but a lecturer or whatever, would give us a series of readings, and everybody was so fully engaged that you'd go home, you'd read the stuff out of pure fascination. You'd come in the next day, and you wouldn't read it, and you wouldn't do an exam on it. You'd just discuss it.
Yeah.
So the information was just taken for granted. There's what Ifeanyi Menkitti thinks about, you know, human interaction or whatever. Here's what Immanuel, Kant thinks about, So you read these kind of things, and then you come in the next day, and everybody else is equally informed as you, and a group of smart and passionate people discussing something for 45 minutes is not a thing you forget quickly.
No. Yeah. So then the reading and the philosophy.
Yeah, so basically I got to kind of read all those books that you're kind of going, I kind of been always, see, when I wanted to apply for the scholarship to this United World College, I had a wonderful headmaster, Mr. Whiteside, in Wilson's Hospital, where I went to secondary school, and his wife, who was the headmistress of the school, said to me, I applied for the interview, and I got the interview, and I was stunned that I even got the interview. So I was really happy. I had to go up to Trinity College here in Dublin to do it, which was a big deal, when you're 16. And going to Trinity College to do this interview for this scholarship, and I was just so happy I got the interview. I was like, wow, that's even good. And I went up, and the first time I did it, I did it 1 year, and I remember I remember getting a suit and putting on a suit and really feeling uncomfortable in my skin and going up and doing it and feeling like I was at this horrible thing. So the next year, I didn't get it that year. And then the next year, actually David Dwan got it that year, the guy who I bought the book for in Oxford, or the book for later in Foyles. But the next year when it came around again, I went, God, I'd love to just apply for that thing again. I think if I just went as myself. So I applied for it, and the person who was in charge of the program, I phoned her up and I said, can I please apply? And she says, well, the applications have closed. And I was like, oh God. And I was so heartbroken. She says, but actually I'm sick at the moment, so I'm going to delay the application process by a week. So why don't you get your application into me? And I was like, it was like God opened a door or something, you know. It was just like, okay, thank you. And I hung up the phone. I was like, okay. So I wrote out the application form, and I didn't care. They asked you, why do you want to go? What do you want to achieve there? And what do you want to give to the people there? I can't remember what I wrote, but I just wrote really from the heart. Mm-hmm. Instead of trying to write the answers I thought they wanted, because I'd done that the first time. So I just wrote, this is me, boom. And I put that down. And then I got the interview again, so I was really excited. And I went, this time, a friend of mine had a jumper, and I remember it was a big woolly light brown jumper with a yin-yang symbol on the front. I didn't know what yin-yang was at the time, but I just really liked the jumper. And I remember I had a pair of kind of dark blood red jeans, and I was like, they're cool. And I was like, that's me. So I borrowed his jumper and I wore my jeans, and I actually slept in on the morning of the interview, and my headmaster came up and woke me up at 4 o'clock in the morning because I had to get a bus from Mullingar. He came up and woke me out of bed. And because I was studying at the time, and because it was the Leaving Cert year, so I was really sleepy. But he woke me up, and he drove me down to the bus station in Mullingar, which was into town, at like 4:30 in the morning or something. Like really incredible. Like the man's passed away since, so kudos to him, Mr. Whiteside. But I remember we got to Mullingar and the bus was pulling out of the bus station. And Mr. Whiteside was the most proper man you've ever met. And he drove that thing like Keanu Reeves and swerved it out in front of the bus that was pulling out of the bus station and stopped the bus from pulling out of the bus station by blocking it with because he drove me in our school bus. It was me and him in our school bus. And it was one of those big old yellow crappy things that you see in American movies. Yeah. We called it the yellow submarine because it looked like the kind of, the way the shape of the yellow submarine? Yeah. One of those kind of, 70s buses. It was painted bright yellow, kind of a deep yellow, like a really nice yellow. So he swerved that in front of the. He swerved it in front of the bus going to Mullingar and said, "Get in!" So I jumped out of the thing and ran in and got on the bus, and then I came up, and I was so tired. I went in and I went. I went to the loo in Bewley's on because I got there so early in the morning, and the interview wasn't till it was the full day of interviews to get it, but the interviews wasn't starting till later in the day. So I went in and I went to the loo and I fell asleep on the loo. I was so tired, and then I ran up and I got to the thing at the interview, and I remember running in the door of the interview, and Paul Colton, who later became the Bishop of Cork, was actually a previous student of the college and a previous graduate of UCC law school, so who had basically was my predecessor, and he was running the interviews that day, and he stood at the door, he stood at the thing, and I ran in the door, and it's like maybe 2 minutes past 8 o'clock or whatever time it's supposed to be starting, and he said, one thing we don't appreciate here is tardiness or something. He said something like he said it in a very gentle way, but I knew it was obviously directed at me, but I was like, oh my God, I've really blown my chances here. But I did the 4 or 5 interviews there were during the day, and got the place.
Interview process in one day.
It was an incredible interview. It was really, really strange because they had one. I remember not knowing what the process was, but actually what happened was it was kind of one academic interview. One interview where I remember we were sitting with a psychologist, and there was a group of about 8 or 9 of us sitting around in a circle, and we went through this thing of he did all these kind of exercises with us, and we didn't know what was going on. And he kind of would say to us, okay, what you're going to do is now you're going to talk to the person beside you for 5 or 10 minutes, and afterwards, no, for say 5 minutes, and afterwards, then you talk to the person to your left or something, and then you have to tell us, or you ask them questions and then they ask you questions, and then what happens is afterwards you have to come back and tell us about that person.
Oh, that's they're like acting exercises.
Yeah.
Are you paying attention?
Are you paying attention? Yeah. So there was an uneven. It was divided into 3 different groups, and our group, the third group, there was maybe 9 or 10. There was 9 people or 11 people, and it was an uneven number. So it's so funny. I haven't thought about this in ages, but the everybody, he paired everybody up, and then it was out of people, and I was on my own, and I was going, oh shit, what's happening? And then he says, okay, you're going to have to do it with me. And I was going, oh no, this guy's like some psychologist. And when you're 16 and you think you're having a conversation with a psychologist, you're going, it's like you think they've got like X-ray specs and they can see your brain, like, so you're totally terrified of what you're saying to him. So sorry, you were going to say something?
No, not at all.
Yeah, but it was like really strange. He sat in front of me and he kind of I remember he had a really strange tie on, and I was like, wow, that is a really nice tie. And he says, oh, you know what? He said, it's funny you say that, because actually that's a tie that was given to me by the first patient I ever treated. And I was like, oh my God, wow. And I said, you still wear it? He said, yeah, I wear it kind of on special occasions. And and he started telling me the story of how he had got in to become a psychologist and how he treated this guy in his relationship with it. Now, he didn't give me details, obviously, because he was out, but he told me kind of around it, you know, and how much it meant to him. And then suddenly our 5 minutes were up. And I went, oh, like, I was supposed to have asked him his age, how many brothers and sisters he had, where he was from. I knew nothing. And it went around, and then he asked me about myself, and I told him all the stuff, or whatever he asked. And then it went around the group, and everybody was like, well, John is 16 years old, and he's born in... And they told all this, like, massive reams of information about somebody. And it came around to my turn, and I was like, oh my God. And I said, look, I've been talking to him for 5 minutes. I forgot to ask him all that stuff, but I can tell you about his tie. And I just told the story of his tie. So it was those kind of like weird, you know, kind of like, and now I look back at it and go, well, I actually had a conversation with him.
Yeah, and you were kind of liberated from the rules, if you like.
Yeah. Now, at the time, I thought I had totally failed disastrously, but it was just, and I remember having a really horrible, most horrible interview with Paul Coulton. Because I went in and he had my application form and he held it like it was a turd. And I remember it was a really long, thin room, a little bit like the room we're in now, but he was sitting behind a table at one far end of the room. And when I went in the door, he was sitting at a chair behind his desk at one end of the room. And at the far end, just when you open the door, there was a chair that the door almost banged off. So you come inside the door and your chair is down this end of the room and he's off up there at the far end of the room, and you're like going, and the room is really narrow and thin, like a broom closet or something, like a long thing. You could kind of almost stretch your arms out and touch the 2 walls. Like, it was really weird room, like kind of like this room, you know, a little bit wider. But and I went, that's really weird. And I remember just going, like, I just grabbed the chair and picked it up and walked straight up to the table and put it right there in front of him and had the conversation. I was like, I'm not going to sit down here and talk to you, like, I can't. So I don't know what was going on there, but I remember he held my application form like it was a turd, and like it was like the most disgusting thing he'd ever been handed, and he just assaulted me. It was, I mean, when I look back now, he was kind of saying, so what do you think of Ireland? And I'd say, well, I mean, I think Ireland's a really nice country. He says, you think we're nice, do you? He says, what's going on in Northern Ireland? Do you think that's nice? And I was like, you're 16. I was going, well, you know, I mean, I said, you know, there's people who've, you know, there's a lot of history there. People who are acting out of hurt and and they're acting out of hurt. And he said, you think? And he basically everything I am, you know. And he's so intelligent. It was terrifying. And like, you're kind of coming up with your 16-year-old answers to these questions, and he's like so brilliantly informed, and he's like he's annihilating everything. But you just keep going. You keep going. Okay, I see where you're coming from.
Me arguing with my brother. So that was foils. That was something to do with foils.
Oh my God. So I went there, and then I came back, I did law, and then I ended up in foils. And then when I was in foils, I'd already got a law degree, and I read all the books that I kind of wanted to read, and I kind of scrubbed my brain clean. And just by reading the things I wanted to read and having these incredible conversations with all these crazy people who came in and buy books and foils.
And there is something, I think it happens to everyone, like college is brilliant but there is kind of a regiment, there is a system that you have to conform to, that your brain conforms to. And it's really useful, but I think maybe there's a reaction to that that you just kind of have to explode.
You have to explode.
And let the air back in.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it, actually. That's a really good way.
And I think that's natural. And it happens to most people.
Yeah.
So, film school.
Finally, we get to film school. Sorry, taking it.
No, it's fine. It's perfectly fine.
So film school, so then what happened was 3 different people who I'd known throughout my life. One was living in New York, one was in England, and the other was a guy from Japan. One of them actually sent me an application form for NYU Film School. And the 2 others all said to me, "Why don't you go to film school?" And I was like, "What?" And until the 3 of them did it, all around the same time.
And was this because you would speak a lot about film?
Yeah. I mean, it was like even when I was in college in Canada or whatever, and in my spare time I'd be making films or it was just what I did. But I didn't think it was a job. Like all the way through law school, all my spare time was making short films.
And was that just because at the time, and I mean it's still the case, but at the time it just wasn't kind of a career that was pitched as a career? So
I mean, you're not going to go into a career guidance counsellor and say, "I want to be a filmmaker," and they go, "Okay, go for it."
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't even know there was courses in film. I didn't even investigate it. Look, even growing up as a kid in the 80s, Ireland was so economically depressed that you come out going, "What I need is a job, and I need something that's going to give me some money. And then when I've got some money, maybe I can do these things that I like to do." And that was the kind of logic. And so the thought of becoming a filmmaker was just was beyond the beyond. It was just so out of my brain could not compute, that it could even be a possibility. And then...
Did you ever but you must have known it was something you wanted to do, no? Did you just not?
Yeah, I mean, when I was in film school, I wrote short films and applied for the Irish Film Board, short film award, to go and make short films and stuff like that. I spent, that kind of thing where you're studying, and you become obsessed with something else, and you're going, "I really should be studying." The thing I was obsessed with was making films. So I would write screenplays in my spare time, and I'd say, "Right, I'm going to give myself half an hour today that I'm allowed to write a screenplay in, and that'll be my free time." And all my free time, I'd be writing scripts. And that was my prize for doing the hard work, studying.
Yeah, okay.
So, and I applied. I remember I wrote a film called American That and sent it into the film board trying to get money. I didn't even know how to write a script, I'm sure it wasn't even formatted properly. It was just, this is a film, I've got these ideas, but I really wanted to do it, but I just didn't think I was allowed.
Okay.
And I think we spend so much of our time looking for permission or thinking that there's a way you're supposed to be, and that's what you conform to, and that's just the way things are. But then, 3 of my friends said, "Why don't you just go to film school? Why don't you just go to film school?" And I went, "Fuck yeah, why don't I just go to film school?" I was like I was a genius. I finally figured it out. So what I did was, I looked into, and I knew there's a really good film school in Ireland called Dunleary Institute of Arts and Technology, which is now the National Film School, and they only took, I think, 23 people or 22 people or something at the time, 24 or something, I can't remember. But they took a small number of people, and I was like, okay, that's hard to get into. If I get in there, I'll take that as a sign. And then they were like, you need a portfolio of photographs, you need to have a little short script written, and they kind of had this stuff, and I had no portfolio. So working in foils was my portfolio year. So I had some screenplays written from when I was in law school, and then I took photographs in foils, and I bought a little crappy camera and took loads of photographs, and actually I think it was a borrowed camera, did it, yeah. And I just took loads of photographs and became kind of a little bit obsessed with photography, and then reading. I was reading so much, and then I went.
And what were you reading? Just anything? The reason I actually started telling you about the
the obsession with reading before and the philosophy and stuff was because my headmistress, when I got the interview for this to go to Pearson College, when I was told I was going to have an interview, she said, "Why don't you come up to me and I'll do a mock interview for you so you can see what it's like."
Okay.
And she knew one person who had got in before, so she sent me very kindly to him, and he talked to me as well. And I kind of did a little bit of a mock interview with him, so it was really nice. I mean, you know, she really went out of her way to try and give me.
But obviously, people had a lot of time for you because they do that.
They do that, yeah. I guess,
yeah.
It was really good. I mean, I was really lucky. Well, she had worked with us on plays, and I had done drama with her, and I'd been kind of the lead actor in a couple of plays that she had directed when I was in secondary school. We did the Westmeath Drama Festival and won a couple of prizes there and stuff. And we'd done like lots of drama. Winner of the Westmeath Drama Festival.
For what play?
Oh my god. I did 2 plays. I did a play by Constance Cox based on a short story by Oscar Wilde called Lord Arthur Savile's Crime, and I played Lord Arthur Savile.
Okay.
And we won that one best play in the Westmeath Drama Awards, and I got best actor.
These are not insignificant things.
So we did that, and that was great. And we did lots of plays, and she was really great, fantastic. And you know, I mean, so many of the teachers throughout that I had, you know, kind of would have inspired that kind of thing of like, go and do anything you want. And Wilson's was fantastic for that. Because it was a boarding school, we did so many extracurricular activities.
Yeah.
Just poured my like at the first few weeks I went down there, I was like, "Mommy, I want to come home." And then like, you know, 6 weeks in, I'm like, "Mom, I ain't got time for this phone call. I've got a play to rehearse. I'm going canoeing. You know, I'll see you at Christmas if there's no canoeing trip, you know." And it wasn't like we did fancy canoeing trips. It was just like one of the teachers built canoes, and any of the ones that didn't work out, he just donated them to schools, so they had some canoes. Like, it wasn't posh or anything. It was just like, but it was just like all you need is a canoe and a vest, and that's it. Like, so it's not like a fancy thing. It's just like it's fancy when you haven't done it before. It was so exciting, you know. She said to me during my interview with her, she said, "What books have you read?" This is on a mock interview, and I was like, "Oh, well, I've read," and I started listing the books that I'd read, which were pretty much the books that were on the junior cert.
Okay.
and then things that I read that my sister had put down out of her hand, you know, in my childhood. And she goes, "You haven't really read any books then, have you?" And I was like, "Well, I've read all those ones, and I like Garfield, and I like," you know, it's like, and she goes, "Oh my god," she goes, "You can't go to this interview having read just that number of books. You're going to have to read more." And I was like, "Okay," and I really wanted to go to Pearson College.
Yeah.
So she wrote me a list of books. She wrote me a list of 20 books and said, "Read them."
Okay.
And it was coming up to, I think it was Easter break, which is like 2 weeks or something. And I had 2 weeks. I think I read a book every 2 days. I just went home and I went to the library and I took out The Mill on the Floss and Scoop by Evelyn Waugh and 1984 and Brave New World, and she gave me a list. and it was Tess of the D'Urbervilles and you know, that kind of stuff. Like, a lot of classics. And Emma Jane. I read Jane Austen, but I read Pride and Prejudice, and like a lot of those classics. And the first few you read, I was like, "Oh my god, this is doing my head in." Now, we had a brilliant English teacher, Jerry Eager, in my school, who I credit with absolutely with my love of English. But reading those books also, just reading kind of beyond what you were supposed to read, was a really rich process. And it gave me like the first 2 or 3 books was like, I may as well have stabbed my eyes with them. You know, it was like so hard to read them because you're just not used to putting that much attention into reading this. Yeah, the old English and the density of the text and the heaviness and stuff. And then when you get the richness of the story, you're like, "Oh my god, this is amazing." So I read, and I read most of those books then before the interview. And so at least I could go in and say, "Well, I've read all those." But actually, much more importantly than that, I become obsessed with books. So, which is not a great thing in your leaving cert year to just suddenly become obsessed with reading books, but when you don't want to read the ones that are on the curriculum. I just started. So then when I went to Foyles, I was like, "Oh, I had basically, at one stage I found this book, and it was Aldous Huxley, I think it was, or Anthony Burgess, had written a thing saying the 100 books you should read. And I really liked those two writers. I thought their work was amazing. So I thought, if this guy says these are good books, they're probably worth having a check out. So I copied down the list into a copybook, and I started going through the list of 100 books that he said to read. And I did that before Foils, but I had a lot still to do, so I kind of did that list. And then but obviously by the time I got to Foils, I had much more a sense of what I liked.
Yeah.
So I kind of, and also I wanted to read Ulysses, because I had just been to college in Canada, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, you're where James Joyce is from." I was going, "Yeah, but I haven't read Ulysses." So I was like, "Oh man, I gotta read that book."
And did you?
Yeah, I read it. But that was the thing, I was really embarrassed about reading it, because I was like, oh my God, I can't be seen on the subway train reading Ulysses. I look like such a wanker. So I remember I bought this kind of, I found a plastic cover for the book that was like fit exactly on it, that was from a different book, and I put it on it, and then I put all this kind of Japanese stickers and shit on it, so you didn't know what I was reading. So I felt okay then reading it.
Okay.
So, but it took me a long time to read that book.
Yeah.
So dense. And I read the kind of students' abridged version, so I'd have some fucking clue of what's going on. Which is about twice as thick again, you know, and you have to read and then turn back the page and go, oh, that reference is about that, oh, and then, so it's a slow process.
And did you make sense of it?
I made feeling of it.
Okay.
I don't know, yeah, I mean, the sense is there, I think. It was a hard read, I think, even though I read quite a bit at the time. But I made sense in the sense of sense feeling. I think I know Joyce kind of always wanted it to be read out loud, and that made an awful lot of sense to me. And it felt like, if you listen to Astral Weeks by Van Morrison, I think it's in the same kind of zone.
Right, okay. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
That's kind of my closest comparison.
Yeah, it's kind, yeah.
It's
there's a,
I suppose the classic phrase is the stream of consciousness sense of it, but it's actually, it's about something really intense, and it's really honestly trying to explore it, and it's, I mean, really intelligent book, probably much more intelligent than I am, you know, but I think it's one of those books that it's there, you could probably read it again and get something very different, and I think it gives you what you need. Like, you know, like a really good song, you'll come back to it, you'll listen to it again, and you hear, oh, that's what it's about now. And I think it's like that. You know, I think it responds to who you are at the time. I read it in quite an academic way, I think, at the beginning, and that's why I bought the students' abridged version, because I really wanted to know it. And I read all these little books around it, like, you know, other people who I thought were super smart, you know, expounding on the book, so I could kind of understand what they thought was going on, and what the richness was, and to make sure I got it. Like, I wanted to get it, you know, and that's the kind of way I attacked the beginning of the book. But I think probably partially by being in Foils, and Foils was kind of like we used to call it Kafka's bookstore, because it was so chaotically disorganized, and yet that had its own form of organization, that you knew exactly what you're supposed to do, but it was a crazy system. And the characters who Mrs. Foyle had picked to populate her bookstore were all really interesting people. I'm not saying I was, but they all were. I felt like, so I used to keep notes and write little things about them and stuff, and they were kind of a really interesting group of misfits who I kind of look back on it now. You could only work there for a year, and then she kind of let you go. And I kind of look back on it now, and I think what she was trying to do was trying to give a kind of a safe haven to people who were kind of floating, and were trying to find their feet on planet Earth, and felt they were kind of on some treadmill and wanted to kind of be off the treadmill, and she let you get off the treadmill for a year and read all you wanted, and you couldn't get fired. She'd never fire you. You could say anything you wanted to a customer, because she kind of went, well, I've hired you because I think you're a trustworthy person and you're not rude and you're not whatever, so if you say anything rude to a person, it's because they deserve it, or and I know, not that you would say something rude, but nobody ever got in trouble for anything. The only thing she'd fire you for was being late. So there was that kind of integral trust from her, and that kind of had an energy about the place, which meant that people could be who they wanted to be. You could be yourself. You didn't have to be a polite person working in a bookstore. You know, that kind of thing of playing the gestalt of somebody. Like you don't have to play, you know, like if you're working in a restaurant, you play the gestalt of the waiter. You know, hello sir, can you please have a seat? You know, you didn't have to play the gestalt of the bookstore worker. You just had to be Michael hanging out in the bookstore and like, I'll help you if you're looking for a book, you know. And you'd have engage people on a human level instead of on the level of you're a person buying a book and I'm an employee here. Now you did the job of an employee because you knew that was your role, but you engage people as people. Yeah. So sorry, where are we going with this?
No.
But that was it.
I love that bookstore. So it's really interesting
incredible.
too.
Yeah. And I mean, really great bunch of. I mean, you couldn't cast that bookstore. Like it was incredible.
And is it still?
It's the year I was there. Mrs. Foyle passed away.
Okay.
So that's what I was saying. would have been one of the last people she employed.
Is it still in the Foyle family?
It is. I think it's her nephew who has it now. And he's modernised it, and I
yeah,
believe
they have, and that's recent because it's now a lot tidier than years ago.
I mean the top floor, the books were stacked vertically when I went into that room. They weren't in alphabetical order. I mean, there was piles of books all over the floor, and you had to wade through them going into that department. It was just chaos. But it was brilliant chaos. And you just go in there and you trip it over a book and you're going, oh, that's interesting. And like people come in and say, have you got this book? And it might be like 60 years old, and you're saying, wait a second, that's got a kind of a green cover, doesn't it? I kicked it the other day, you know, exactly. I was using it to hold the door open the other day, and they're like, my God, that's a classic. There's only like, I can't find it. I've been looking for a copy for like 10 years. Because it was kind of just at the pre-Amazon internet time.
Yeah,
so that's where everybody from around the world would come to find books that they couldn't find anywhere else. So it was kind of a mecca for books. It was an incredible place to work and just an incredible place to be as a human being, as an interested reader and lover of books, and just.
It sounds like an amazing year.
It was an amazing year. It was an amazing year. Amazing year.
So
finally you get to film school. Oh my God! Sorry, this is such a crazy word.
It's fine, totally fine.
So okay, so you can edit all that bit, and then we can you can start the whole thing just here. No, I think it's fine. So I went to film school, and I always knew I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I always knew I was going to film school.
I know you go. Okay, so you go to film school, but all of that went before, totally, that was your kind of your breeding ground for being a filmmaker.
Totally. I spent my life training to be a filmmaker. I just didn't know it. I mean, like, and you know, learning music and playing piano and doing all that drama. It was all just reading all those books, becoming obsessed with story, going into Foyle's bookstore, and at that stage I thought, maybe I want to be a writer, because remember I hadn't thought I wanted to be a filmmaker yet. I thought I'd be a writer, and then seeing this voluminous bookstore with hundreds of thousands of incredible books, and I was going, I'm going to write something, but all that's here is piles and piles and piles of books, and I can't just add another book to the pile, because that's not meaningful.
Yeah.
What's meaningful is to start another pile. Start my own, but like I have to do something that's going to be so different from all this other stuff that it's going to matter, that it's going to resonate on some, like, cause there's so many brilliant minds here, all captured in this building. I have to do something that's...
You're going to add to it.
I'm going to add to it. Yeah. Exactly. I'm not just going to put another thing on the pile. Yeah. So it was kind of instructive in that way too.
But it's interesting that being a writer was something you considered an entertained but not a filmmaker.
Yeah, because you could kind of do that, like, you just need a pen and patience.
But you had made, like, you just made films when you were 6 years old as well. Like, it's not that you had that either.
No, totally, but films for me were still Hollywood, I think. Like, I mean, it's like... It was... See, okay, sorry, what were you saying?
No, it's just, it sounds like, the way you do that thing where the one thing you want to do or the one thing you need to do is the one thing you avoid.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The one thing that you need to do, you avoid.
Yeah.
Is it because it's too scary, or?
I don't know. I interviewed Ross Whittaker a few weeks ago, and he said this thing that the obstacle is the way.
That's good. Yeah. The obstacle is the way. That's it. The obstacle is the way. Okay. That's good.
Anyway,
I like that. No, that's nice.
It was good. Yeah, it was. So film school.
Yeah.
So you went to Dunleary.
Went to Dunleary.
Okay.
And
Was that good?
It was fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah, it was brilliant. I mean, like we had really passionate teachers, but the main thing I think the strength of it was they had a pretty intense selection process. So by the time you got in there, you felt like, man, I kind of worked pretty hard to get in here.
Okay.
And you were with other people who were equally mentally deranged and wanted to spend all their time making films with you. So it was like, woo, great. Oh, there's other crackpots. Great, let's do it.
But was it amazing to be there and to make that decision and to be within this world?
Just having done years and years of academia,
yeah.
and like a pretty high level, and then kind of going, oh my God, I'm going to spend the next 3 years, and what I'm going to be doing is making films, watching films, talking about films, studying films, eating, sleeping, and shooting films. Oh yeah, come home. It's so nice. It's a really nice sensation, to do that, and then to find people who are just all in the same way. And then like another thing that happened that was quite strange was like when I was in boarding school at 13, probably my best friend at boarding school was Ken Wardrop.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So when I went to London, and I broke up with my girlfriend in London, I ended up living with Ken at the time in London, and we lived together for a year.
So what did you
get in film school?
What was it like, or how did it prepare you for what came after? Or?
Well, it prepared me because we worked really hard and we were able to devote all our time to making films.
Okay.
Because I had already done a degree, I had to pay my way through film school. So I got a job in the Irish Independent.
Okay.
And I worked 20 hours a week part-time in the Irish Independent.
Okay.
I did advertising for them. So I actually was, if you were phoning in an ad at the time, I was the guy on the end of the line who took the ad. And I used to take death notices as well.
All these jobs that have disappeared because we don't phone in ads anymore.
It was my bread and butter. It paid me through film school.
Did you get funny ads? Were there?
Oh yeah, Like I mean, you did get the romantic ads from these owl fellas and stuff. Like it was so cute. Yeah.
Farmers.
It was really nice, and people trying to sell things. What? It was really funny. It was really funny, and then there were so many characters that it bring in. It was a really nice job, and then the people who I worked with in the ad department was only 2 guys at the time, Tony and myself, and then there was maybe 25 or 30 women. But it was a really, really nice group of people. Okay. They were fantastic, and I learned a lot from them too. I mean, just because, on a Sunday you go in and there's kind of quiet spells, and you end up in these mad long conversations about, or even between ads, or just over lunch break and stuff. Just really interesting people.
Mm-hmm.
So from film school, I went in, thought I wanted to be a writer-director, probably because I wrote, and I ended up directing quite a bit of stuff in college. And then Anne O'Leary, who's just retired the other day as head of the National Film School, I was just at her retirement party the other evening. She said to me one day, she said, your photographs when you did the application form were amazing. You should also look at doing cinematography as well. You should do the writing and directing, but learn this other craft. And to be honest with you, I was in first year, I didn't even know what cinematography was. So I was like, okay, well if I'm going to learn something else, I mean, cinematography seems like a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
So I just was desperate to get on set. I'd never been on a set of a film. I had no idea what filmmaking was. I just no clue.
Which is so funny, having been so consumed by it.
Yeah, totally. I hadn't a clue. I was terrified. I was going, oh my God. I remember having to do a scene, like the first project we got in class, I was like, they said, I signed up, and I was like, okay. I remember I signed up to be cinematographer. And I was going, Jesus, I don't even know what it is. And they were like, and it was so early in the course that I hadn't even touched the light. And I was so terrified. And I went down to the store and I checked out a light just to see how to plug it in and turn it on and how to adjust it. And then I was like, okay, now I'm ready to light the first thing. It was like literally, it was that bad. But it was kind of interesting. And then, I owe Anne the exploration of cinematography, and then I kind of got more into it. And what happened was I signed up to be a boom op on a film, and the person who was recording sound said to me, have you ever boom opped before? And I said, I've never been on a film set before, this is my first time. And she goes, well, you're not holding my boom. And I was like, okay. So she wouldn't let me hold the boom. So I was so desperate to impress. And she's like, you can take notes. I was like, okay. So I'm pretty fastidious. So I took these incredibly beautiful notes, like really nicely. And every detail she wanted, I was like, all really nice. But I was incredibly bored. And but I was getting on the film set, so I was getting to see how it was being made. And at the time, Tom Comerford, who was 2 years ahead of me, who's a cinematographer, he would have shot Savage, and he shoots stuff for Brendan Muldowney.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he was 2 years ahead of me in college, and he was shooting the film. This was a short film in college, and they were understaffed, and they were just trying to get stuff done. And I remember they were moving boxes, and I knew they were stuck, and I was just writing all these notes, and I had all my notes done. So I just started moving boxes with a Virginia hand, and they were like, yeah. So I just moved the boxes, and then every time they were stuck, I just helped them move the boxes, like boxes of lights. Like, can I move? Didn't even know. Can I touch this? Is this okay? Can I move this? And I just moved stuff for them, and I kind of did that quietly, just helping out when I could.
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, he said to me, "Thanks very much for that." I was like, "Oh look, I wasn't busy. I was happy to help out." And then before the next shoot, he came up to me and said, "Do you want to be a trainee on the next thing I do?" I was like, brilliant. So I got a year of being a trainee with Tom Comerford, who's a brilliant cinematographer. And I learned an awful lot from watching Tom.
And what is cinematography? If you had to define it in a
What is cinematography? Cinematography is showing you the story. That's what cinematography is. It's showing you the story. So I can tell you the story and you can hear all the information, but showing it to you allows you to feel it from how the visuals are, and it gives you a more immediate access because it's visual. So it's kind of trying to find a way to visualize the narrative so that you can be, I would say, emotionally connected to it, so that you can feel the story. Okay. It's kind of more about feeling, I think, than seeing.
And within that then, so because acting maybe is also showing you the story.
Yeah.
So what are your what are the elements?
Well, the things you can control in cinematography. I mean, like, there's no neutral position. I mean, well, I suppose if you were to say what's a neutral position, if I'm sitting in front of you and looking directly at you, that feels quite neutral. You know, yeah. If you turn your back on me, then I'm behind you and I'm not neutral. I'm seeing you from behind. If I'm to the side of you, I'm seeing you in a different way. So it's kind of deciding how the audience are going to see the story.
Right. Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So point of view.
Point of view. Okay. Point of view, but also how you're lit in this room now is there's 4 tungsten lamps over your head, and they're kind of evenly lighting you and evenly lighting the wall behind. But it gives a mood to the room, and to me, I would say it feels quite honest, the room, because everything's quite evenly lit. So if I come into this interview, it feels like quite an honest sort of a space or something, you know what I mean? Like spaces, I kind of react to physical spaces. I'm not mad about doing stuff on set. I'm sorry, like building sets. I don't like perfectly constructed things I like the mess.
Okay.
I think the mess and the kind of, like, you see the way the paint is chipped here. If you get somebody to try and build this room, they won't chip the paint there like that. That's because that's where people's elbows are, and that feels lived in to me.
Okay.
You know, when people sit down at the end of that table and see it's at the height of the chairs, so the chairs rub off that place, and there's bits of the table that are dirtier and more worn than others, just because that's where people's elbows are, and that kind of texture that you get off things, off a space, like how you experience it when you walk into that space. I think a big part of cinematography is trying to let the audience feel what you feel when you walk into the space, and feel what you feel when you watch those actors deliver that performance, and feel what you feel when an explosion happens, or it's trying to connect with the emotion of it always, rather than just. I always think if you're walking in to shoot a film and you can put the camera anywhere and you can light it any way you want, then you're in really big trouble, because you don't know what you're trying to do, because you're not just trying to film it, you're trying to communicate something. So you have to be kind of clear on what you're trying to communicate.
So where is your starting point then? Is it the script, or is it?
It's the script. Yeah, it's the script. In drama, it's the script for sure. And then it's you, like if you're as a director or if you're the cinematographer and you come on, you really try and it's like trying to tune into a frequency, first of all of the script and then of the director, or if you're directing yourself, to find what your frequency is on it. That like. For the actual physical starting point can be very different. I mean, I did a film with Ken Wardrop, and we had done a lot of short films together. We did a series of short films for Channel 4, and we did Ken's graduate film called Undressing My Mother. And when we came to do a film, his and hers, again, we gathered a lot of photographs, and we kind of. Ken had told me what he was trying to do, and Kate shot it with me. She was a cinematographer on it with me, Kate McCullough. But Ken knew what he was trying to do, and then we tried to find images that communicated some of that. Communicated.
Kind of had a quality.
Yeah. It's a little bit imprecise, because sometimes you can't find the right words, but you can always find the right picture. Or you can find.
In the way that you understand, say, a song, but you can't really articulate that, but you understand it through a kind of a feeling. Yeah, because that's what it comes down to, is those kind of feelings and this kind of intangible type stuff. So you can even find a photograph and you say, it's not the whole photograph, but do you see how the way the person standing in the corner of the room there, that's the right energy. And you'd show that to Ken, and Ken go, yeah, that's the right energy. And you say, see, I found this one. See this doorway, or see this table, or see this whatever. And you kind of just talk about what you're responding to in these images. Okay.
And we'd spend a day maybe at the National Film School just gathering images and talking about them and building them up, and kind of just going through that process and just kind of finding a vision for it, so that, because you can talk about it academically in words, but having these kind of images really helps as a cinematographer to kind of find how you see the thing, and that you can share that with the other members of the team. So that
happens, and then what?
Well, I mean, it's obviously it's different for every film. So, for example, I did another film with Terry McMahon called Patrick's Day, and I said to Terry, I found this. What usually helps me is to go to and look at these pictures.
Okay.
So we went and did that. But Terry had written a script himself, brilliant script, and it was like, okay, he had a couple of films in mind that he thought, okay, it's kind of a little bit of the energy of, say, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest for Patrick's Day, or a little bit the energy of Punch Drunk Love, this kind of little bit messy, chaotic, a little bit stylized in places, and not just kitchen sink drama type stuff, but kind of odd, and a little bit of odd framing, and just some of the kind of things. And we just watched those films together, then you just watch those films together, and you just talk about the script. And Terry's really big on theme, and I think it's I've learned a lot from Terry, from working with him, and a lot from most of the directors that I worked with, from all the directors, to be honest. But yeah, Terry would be really big on theme, and he's like, what's this film really about? And when you start digging down into what's really going on, then you try and shoot what's really going on, and the story handles itself in a way, Yeah. You try and capture a kind of a bit of a deeper essence or something, and you just hope that it somehow washes over, like that it somehow percolates through people.
So in a way, like if you watched Patrick's Day without the actors, from a cinematography point of view,
Oh my God, what a terrible thing to do.
But
Should you still get it?
Yeah.
I mean, if there's no, I mean, it's a story about people. So if there's no point being a cinematographer without people, as far as I'm concerned. Not without people, but I mean, in a human story.
But in terms of the quality or the tone or the
yeah, I mean, you should. Well, I mean, if they didn't see what, maybe a clearer way to do. I mean, Owen Harris, who was a great lecturer at the National Film School in screenwriting. He would always say, you've got to be able to write this script that when you play it to a group of Puerto Ricans who don't speak any English, they watch the film, they totally understand what's going on, even though they haven't heard a word that anybody said, but they completely understand every scene. And I think it's a pretty good rule of thumb that, like, if you watch people interacting, even though you don't know exactly what's going on, you feel it and you kind of know it. So, like with Patrick's Day, for example, I mean, some of it's planned and some of it's not planned. You know, like we storyboarded the entire movie, but I would say at the same time there were decisions made on set that were completely spontaneous and completely free within that. Such as, we came up on the first day and we were doing one of the first few shots and we were looking at the room was limited in its size, so for the type of shot we needed there was only 2 lenses available to us. And we looked at the 2 lenses and Terry and I looked at each other and said, do you want it back here on a longer lens that will feel like this? Or do you want to will we shoot it up closer on this wider lens that's a little bit distorted and a little bit weirder, but probably not as pretty? And we kind of looked at each other and kind of almost without saying, we both went, yeah, we're going to go on that lens, which was the uglier one. Okay. And we're like, yeah, it just feels right, I don't know. And then I would say I shot almost the first half of the film on that lens. Now, the thing that happened was that Patrick and his mother, it was a 24mm lens. And the 24mm lens, if you're shooting anamorphic aspect ratio on a spherical lens, which was what we were doing, it's quite a wide lens. And to get a head and shoulder 2 shot means that if I'm across the table from you, this is a comfortable distance to have a conversation. Yeah. Now if I get up from my chair and I come over here, this becomes a more intimate conversation. Yeah. And if I move to here, it becomes maybe slightly uncomfortable because I'm a little bit too close to you and it kind of doesn't seem appropriate for the conversation we're having. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So what happened was, if you put on that lens, to get a nice 2 shot, you have to get kind of uncomfortably close to the people. And that was actually the relationship with Patrick and his mother. So every time I would film Patrick and his mother, the crew would just go, the camera team would just go, oh, I'm 24 minutes. And I didn't decide that in advance, but I kind of kept doing it for the first few days, and then after a while it became this running joke. I'm like, oh my God, we'll shoot this whole film on the same lens. And actually what happened is...
And is that unusual? You're shooting a whole film?
No, his and hers was shot on almost 2 lenses. 3 possibly. We think we used the 3rd lens. I like to be really disciplined in that. I mean, different people are different things. I like to just use a really limited range of lenses. Okay. I know people get kits with like 16 lenses and stuff. I mean, probably because I trained on 4. I like to work with. If I could shoot a film on 1, I'd do it. You know, depends on the film, obviously. But I think if you keep swapping around lenses, you're kind of just jumping people in and out. It's a different style. I think just my style is very simplistic, and it's like if you get into a vibe of looking at the world in a certain way, then that's the way you're looking at the world. So we're able to show Patrick and his mother in this relationship, and every time I filmed it, I mean, the actress, Kerry Fox is an incredible actress. You know, she's in An Angel at My Table, which is an incredible film, and she's fantastic. And suddenly you're on set with her, and she's looking at you going, "You're really close to me with the camera. Can you back off a little bit?" And I was like right in on top of them. And like it takes incredible actors to let the cameraman come in here and the camera stuck up against their noses and not be irritated. Yeah. But they got really used to me, and they just let me float around them and get stuck in on their faces. So that thing, like when I watch it, I'm kind of like, it's that thing of kind of you're watching the film, and you know the way they always say, oh, you try and get the audience to lean in. Patrick's Day, I think, in that relationship between the mother and the son makes you kind of want to lean back a little bit. You feel like, oh, this is a bit too, they're uncomfortably close, and I'm uncomfortably close to watching them. It's like, it puts you in that space, and that's the kind of feeling that I felt off the relationship. Now, it wasn't a logical decision. We discussed it, and we talked about it, and we knew from all our lengthy discussions. I mean, Terry and I took 3 days, went down the country to a hotel, drank copious bottles of wine, and talked about the film. We're supposed to come back with a storyboard, or at least a shot list, and came back with nothing. But we knew exactly what we were trying to do with the film.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we had all those discussions, so we knew what we were trying to do. We weren't always clear about how exactly we were going to do it, but when we saw, we're like, that's it, that's the one. And then...
So you two had a really... You clicked in
Oh,
the relationship
totally.
that you just kind of... You were both on the...
Yeah. Well, I mean, Terry's so smart.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he really knew what he wanted to do. And when you've got that, and then you're just kind of buzzing off this energy, and you just get this bouncy energy where you're, oh, we can try this, and we can do that, we can do that. And it's not like, no, we won't do that, no, we won't do this. It's like, okay, try it, okay, it's not working. Okay, try it, okay. And it's kind of quite playful, and I think just because that's the kind of spirit I made films at 6 years old, you know, it's like play and you find things.
So with this case, with like Patrick's and his mother, and you're kind of mirroring the quality of it through the technicality.
Yeah, well. That's it. So you're shooting the emotions. You know, you're capturing the quality of the relationship in how you're filming it.
And how
now that's for that film. I don't know. I probably haven't done enough films to be able to give you really good answers to these questions.
No, but I mean that's fascinating, because it's like how big a part does like just the physical environment then play in it, in terms of you working off that?
Well, for me, it's massive. I mean, like.
So would you go like scouting or?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, totally. I do an awful lot of scouting, and I love it. And I for me, it's so important. I mean, if you get the right space, you can do so much. You know, because it just gives you a kind of energy. Even the actors walk into the space, and you light it in a certain way, and it's like you're in the movie. You know, you've created the mood. And I know a lot of people would kind of like maybe overlight a scene and then say, yeah, I'm going to grade it this way and stuff. I'm not. I don't know if I have the technical expertise to do that. Mm-hmm. I just light it like I want it to look. I shoot it.
It's very instinctive.
It's very instinctive, yeah. So, and I pretty much light it like it's going to look, like it's not going to look much different in the cinema than what I light it.
And are there certain environments like that you really like in terms of like...
Messy ones. Now, I don't mean messy as in like stuff all over the place, but I mean like undone and chipped wallpaper and torn wallpaper and dirt, like texture. I love texture. I love feeling humans have been in a space. Like I went to a boarding school that was from 1860, and the stairs were all worn in little bends, and there were stone stairs, but you knew that hundreds and thousands of little feet had gone up those stairs for hundreds of years. And I just love that kind of stuff, you know, just the worn, like you know, it's in stone, and you see this worn little place where little feet have gone.
Yeah.
I love that.
And what about then? Like,
and nature, of course.
Yes. Is outdoor, indoor? Are there certain parts of the country?
I mean, like one thing that always kind of it's funny because you could kind of say, you know, I mean, I think in a way beauty's a bit cheap. Like if you give me a beautiful landscape and I take a picture of it and go, okay, so that's really nice. But I mean, and it's really powerful at certain times. But there's kind of a beauty in ugliness, or a beauty in the kind of things we don't look at. And I think that's a big job of the filmmaker, because we are a culture obsessed with beauty and obsessed with the kind of conventions of beauty. And it's really nice in a film if you can take an audience outside their conventional notion of beauty and show them something that's beautiful, that they find beautiful, in something really simple, or in something really basic, or in something really ordinary. I mean, I think that's quite a lot of his and hers, or Undressing My Mother, you know, would be kind of, these are just ordinary people in ordinary homes. Like we'd walk into those homes and, you know, it's a wall painted with magnolia, or the clothes the women would have chosen, and we didn't dress them, they just wore what they wanted to wear, but you know,
yeah, it's that kind of, it's looking at it in a different way as well.
Yeah, I guess if you look at it this way, this can be beautiful.
Yeah.
Like even, for example, how you look at it. Because I mean, with Undressing My Mother, I mean, Ken went away. He was going to do a film called Dilly and Dora, which is where his mum's nickname for her two boobs. So it was going to be like a comedy, and she was going to like take off her clothes. And I know Ken since we were 12 or 13, and I know his mum because I used to get into his house when we were 12 or 13. And so it was kind of going, okay, my mum's going to take off all her clothes, and you're going to film it. And I was like, okay, great. That's what we do for kicks, Ken, you know. But then he went home one weekend and he did the interview, and it's just a voice interview, and he just came back and he played it to me, and I mean, I cried like a baby, and it was just so powerful. It's like maybe 1 hour, 2 hour interview, I think, or maybe it was an hour interview, and in the end the film is like 4 minutes, because I mean, I remember hearing it going, okay, well that has to be the last line of the movie, because there's a line that she says in the interview that's like so powerful, whatever. Okay, that has to be the last line of the movie. And then Ken constructed the audio thing, working towards that moment. And then we knew kind of roughly what the audio was going to be, about a woman talking about her body. But we had to try and break down how are you going to see this body. Okay. And what we kind of felt was, okay, so it's a woman in her mid to late 70s, I think at the time, mid to late 70s, or maybe it was at the time, and she was, you know, maybe overweight, and you're kind of saying, but she felt loved and she felt very beautiful, and we're kind of going, well, we kind of want to honour that. So how do you show an over 70-year-old, maybe overweight woman, and make an audience feel that it's beautiful? And because that's the emotion, right? And what we'd say might be the truth might be something else, but what's the truth? You know, it's like how you see it is the truth, and how you feel about it is the truth. So we kind of wanted, and then Ken had this great idea of like, well, I don't want the audience to see it all, I want them to kind of piece it together. And we were like, okay, so it's like a jigsaw. And we'll never show the whole thing, because what happened was it started off where we just kind of had these fragmentary pictures, and then we're like, okay, the fragmentary pictures seem to be the way to go, and then from that it grew to be, well, let's just do it all in fragmentary pictures, and you never see the whole thing, so the audience have to piece the whole together in their own minds. And that became a kind of a metaphor, and then we had a guiding principle of how to shoot the film. Because it started out with like, well, she's going to talk about her feet, and she's going to talk about her boobs, and she's going to talk about her elbows, and she's going to talk about her back, and she's going to talk about her eyes, and she's going to talk about her nose, and she's going to talk about her ass, you know. And so then we'll do shots of those things, but it'll all be broken and fragmented, so that the audience piece together. And then we thought, if we make each of the elements beautiful, and they piece together these broken, fragmented elements, you end up with a beautiful overall picture that is constructed in your own mind. So that was kind of the theory behind it. I mean, it's funny talking about some of these theories, because a lot of it you do have in advance, but you have a clear idea of what you're doing afterwards when you start talking about it.
Directing.
Okay.
What's that like in comparison to cinematography, or what do you enjoy with that?
Yeah, directing. I guess I've only really directed things that I've written. Okay. So it's all been intensely personal stuff, and I write everything from dreams. So I'll have a dream, and I'll wake up in the middle of the night, and I'll be like, what the fuck? And I'll write that down. Okay. And then maybe I'll kind of be in a half-conscious state, and I'll keep going, oh, and then this or this, and it kind of, and usually an image will stay with me, and it'll hit me in a really powerful way, and I won't understand it. And then making the film, or writing the film, and certainly directing the film is an exploration of what's this about. So I don't know what I'm doing. This is the groping, you know, towards some sort of understanding. Okay. You know, so a film I did after I left college was called Out of the Blue, and it was a film sponsored by Filmbase, and it's about a man who's walking down the beach and he finds a television set floating in the sea, and he brings it home and plugs it in, it doesn't work, and then gives it a kick, and it starts to fill up with water, and then he looks into it more deeply and there's fish swimming around in it, and then he sees there's a mermaid, and she swims up right to the front of the screen and then looks out at him. So there's this mermaid trapped in a television set, and then he's kind of overweight single guy, like 40 something, and bald, and he starts bringing the television on dates with him.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah.
And what's it about?
What's it about?
What would you hope people take away from seeing it, after seeing it?
I don't know. It's really funny because I kind of I'm really funny about answering this now, because I'm kind of going, it's one of those ones, and it's such a kind of an odd journey to try and uncover what you're trying to say, and then you kind of it's like, and kind of it comes to a point where kind of, if you want to dig into that level, it's like if I go and explain to you what a Van Morrison song's about. I'm not saying my film is anything as good as a Van Morrison song, but it's hopefully it's rich enough that you can take what you want from it. I wouldn't like to prescribe or say this is what it's about, because maybe if it's really good, then it opens up a lot of possibilities rather than closing it down to one.
We probably shouldn't even be trying to. You make it and you let it out. And let it go.
But sometimes it's probably useful, and I know I do it all the time. What's that film about? What's that film? But with your own work, I think you do it kind of with your collaborators as you're trying to understand it, and then once it's done, I think hopefully it speaks for itself.